Oh, the prequels. Despite their many flaws and mostly terrible reception around their release, the prequels have aged like fine fucking wine. Attack of the Clones and RTS are now seen as classics in the eyes of many fans. Phantom Menace not so much, but even PM, despite being arguably the worst Star Wars film in terms of tone and execution, still has qualities that make it enjoyable to watch. Mainly this. So now the question becomes, if a trilogy that was received poorly can become great over time, can it happen again? In this case, no. Absolutely not. Now, even though there are many reasons why I don't think the sequels will ever become classics like the prequels did, for example, convoluted plot, bad characters, destruction of legacy characters, absolutely zero sense of direction, and so on and so on, I want to focus on one specific aspect that I think is fundamental to answering this question, and that is purpose. If you're going to continue a story that has already had a satisfying conclusion, then there's going to have to be a damn good reason for it. And I would argue that the sequels trilogy just does not have a proper story that it wants to tell. And it feels pointless in the end. And this isn't a problem exclusive to Star Wars. Independence Day Resurgence was another sequel to a classic movie that had no good reason to exist, other than filling up the pockets of executives and film studios. And the box office reflects how audiences feel. Now I'm fine with studios making some green from our nostalgia. Top Gun Maverick was doing the same thing as the Star Wars sequels were trying to do, by appealing to our old rose-tinted memories of the franchises we grew up with loving. Only one clearly did it better than the other. Maverick technically doesn't need a reason to exist. The plot of the OG Top Gun was concluded. But Maverick created its purpose by expanding on the original work, by giving Tom Cruise a new challenge, being a teacher. It didn't rip up the old characters like some other franchises, and instead honored the first movie and even cleared up some of the mistakes he made regarding the death of Goose and the impact that had on his son.
Prestige!
Fighter pilots of the world should not have come back.
Now let's bring this back to Star Wars. And to do that, we must go back to the very beginning. When you boil down the most important plot point of the original trilogy, it basically comes down to a boy who learns that his father, who used to be the coolest fucking hero in the galaxy, has lost his way and is now serving the forces of evil. So now our young hero, who has dedicated his life to fighting this evil, must now toil with the revelation that he came from the very evil he has sworn to destroy. And from Vader's perspective, his children are all that remains of Padme, the person he turned to the dark side for. He must toil with his allegiance to the Emperor and his latent love for his children. And it was a good story, obviously. A story with good beginning, middle, and ending. So when George Lucas decided to do the prequels, he knew he had to keep one thing in mind.
Yeah, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Or in my words, they had to have a purpose. And their purpose was simple. How did Anakin fall to the dark side? The whole point of the prequels is to show how that very important thing happened, and as a bonus they show how Palps came to power, and the origin of the Empire, and the fall of the Jedi Order. And these are all questions that fans have wanted answered since the OT concluded. Despite the execution being pretty bad, as we all know, the story is rock solid, and it provides the satisfying answers to the questions we had, and it was done in an epic way. By showing us the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, makes his redemption in ROTJ all the more satisfying when he turns on the person who lured him to the dark side, and works to enhance the story of the OT, just like Top Gun Maverick enhances the original. Even though the dialogue is dog shit at some points, the story holds up, it has a purpose, it enhances the original trilogy. It shows how everything fell into place to give us the amazing story of the original trilogy. And it makes Luke's and the Rebel Alliance's triumph over the Emperor and Vader all the more so. Now keeping all that in mind, let's take a look at the sequels. Yeah, this serves no purpose. While the prequels enhanced the OT and made it more enjoyable, the sequels seem hell-bent on destroying the legacy of the OT by unceremoniously shitting all over the original characters before killing them off, and just trying to retread the grounds that the OT already covered, and barely trying to make it look any different, by copying the Smart Girl's homework and changing it up slightly. For example, new Death Star, new evil Skywalker, new Emperor Palps, and then they just fucking gave up and gave us Palps. And remember what I said about the main plot of the OT, Luke and Vader's complicated relationship. The prequels made Vader's revenge on Palpatine better, when it was revealed that Anakin was the prophesied hero that would destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force. Well, actually, no, everything Vader went through, his triumphs, his mistakes, his pain, suffering, sacrifice, and eventual redemption, was for nothing. Because the Sith survived, the Empire got rebooted, Luke failed in creating a new Jedi Order, and a new character took all the glory without earning any of it. We've been here before. We've seen this already, except when we last saw it it was done well. And do the sequels fulfill a specific purpose that could enhance the rest of the overall story? Well, no, they just don't. And in the process of failing at the one thing I believe transcends all the other reasons the sequels failed, it also degrades the previous stories that have been told. As much as I, like many other fans, try to pretend that the sequels aren't canon, they'll always be there. Once you've seen them, you can't help but look differently at the previous two trilogies. Knowing that Vader's sacrifice didn't matter, knowing that Luke out of all people would become a quitter, knowing Han Solo would just become a smuggler again. It just makes watching the OT trilogy and following the characters along on their journeys and character development feel pointless, because we know where they will eventually end up, and it's not satisfying. Now don't get me wrong, if you like the sequels, that's awesome, more power to you. I'm also not suggesting that characters can't change. Hell, Anakin changed a lot in order to become Vader. But when characters make complete 180s, like Luke trying to kill Ben off sensing the dark side of him, while Luke's whole thing in the OT was not giving up on the small amount of good still remaining in his father, everyone around him, including Obi-Wan, had given up on him, and Luke was right not to give up on Vader. It's not how you develop a character, that's how you destroy one. And this is a problem that's plaguing more and more franchises these days. Jurassic World, Terminator, Fast and Furious, bunch of others. They just don't feel like what you're watching is really meaning anything. They feel pointless. That's not really what you want your story to feel like. Anyways, so if you find yourself in the unlikely situation that you're writing a sequel to anything, keep in mind that the story needs to have a purpose. Anyways, guys, like and subscribe, do all of that jazz. Cheers.